Hi, everyone. I'm Kyler from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with Jeroen Corthout, who is the co-founder of Salesflare, which is listed as the #1 CRM system by Product Hunt. Jeroen is currently based in Antwerp, where he's busy working with the Salesflare team. Salesflare is an intelligent CRM which startups and small businesses love to use. It's a zero-input sales pipeline tool that thinks and works for its user, not the other way around. So with no more manual data entry, Salesflare fills out your address book and keeps track of all interactions with the people you're in contact with. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jeroen. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Content Mix.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super happy to be here.
So to get the interview started, I kind of want to learn more about who you are. So if you could tell us a bit more about yourself and explain a bit more about your background experience and essentially how did you end up where you are today?
Long story, short story.
You can do the long story. It's fine.
The long story. So I'm Jeroen Corthout. I'm co-founder and CEO of Salesflare. I am 35 years old. I have a dog now. Like Kyler already said, Salesflare is a CRM system for small and medium-sized businesses. A CRM system, that means it's actually a sales CRM, so it's focused on helping salespeople or people who do sales at least follow up their leads in a better way. And like I said, it's zero input in the sense that most CRMs need a ton of data input if you want to get some value back. And Salesflare automates all that, so you don't have to fill it out constantly, and it actually helps you to follow up better. Now, how I got to doing this. I think most of it started when I was like 15, 16. I was building websites. It was not a new thing at that point, but it was sort of for me. I had been first playing around with GeoCities. That was in the beginning, like a thing in which you could build these very, very simple websites. And then I wanted to take a step up, and then I built a website for myself first, which was mainly built with Flash, actually, which back in the day still existed. It was popular, and you could build anything with it and animate it and make it interactive. It was amazing. It was such a step up over normal HTML back then, and now the tables have turned. But so I really enjoyed that. I made one for myself first, then I made one for my mom, who is an architect. And then I started making some for other people. And I really saw myself like starting a business based on that. I was going to have a web design business. I think like many entrepreneurs that are in software business right now, it's like the web design business was the dream back then. And then to make a very long story short, I studied engineering. First thinking that would help me with my web design business, but also because my dad was an engineer and always raised us to become engineers. I didn't end up doing computer engineering or so. I chose for electronical engineering with business management, and then moved into biomedical engineering. I want to do something more with people rather than a purely engineering job. I always really liked the aspect of creating something for people, not just the creating by itself. Or the science or whatever. And actually then when I finished my studies of biomedical engineering, I went applying for jobs, and it seemed that nobody wanted to give me anything else than a pure engineering job. So what I ended up doing after that was business school. I wanted to get into quote unquote business and do something there. And that actually allowed me after a year of business school to get straight into a marketing role. It's just completely different. But it was fun because my thinking behind that was like, I want to put products into a market, and what better experience is to be a product manager. It was at a pharma company for me because I came from the medical background, right? I thought that was a great idea. It would teach me so much. I thought about how to do that. Now, in the end, the role that I ended up taking as my first job was very, very limited. I was basically making brochures based on international brochures and then teaching the sales team how to use them. And I also could create one site and other people would come to me with their sites, which was cool because I knew a lot about it and nobody else did around there. So, and then because I was so bored, I always knew that I wanted to start my own company. I thought, oh, I'm going to do it from here. And my one of my ideas was to start a web business for pharma companies. But then when I started looking at that and I talked to some people, I actually found out that somebody I knew had a business like that, but like on a totally different level. It was a marketing consultancy helping pharma companies to go digital, whereas they come from a very straight sales model. The world had changed and pharma companies had to change, and there was a lot of work to do. And I ended up working there. I worked there for about 4 years, during which time I learned a ton about marketing, specifically like the new way of doing marketing, let's say, not the old print stuff and all. Some of that as well, but mainly digital marketing. I was also an account manager there. So my role was sort of double. 40% of my time I would spend selling and taking care of customers, and 60% of the time I was actually managing projects. And I learned a lot about both. But during that time, I went part-time. I tried different startup projects. To make a long story short, most of them failed. And Salesflare is my first successful one. And it actually grew from another project where we were selling business intelligence software. And after a conference, we had so many leads. We needed a way to close them consistently. We needed a way to follow up well. And we tried different systems, and we just didn't have the discipline to keep up with any of them. It seemed like all of these systems came with an expectation that we would fill them out perfectly all the time, huge amount of discipline. And we just didn't have that. And then we figured, like, actually what we're doing here is automatable. All of the information we're filling out is already in our mailbox, it's in our calendar, it's in our phone, it's in social media, company databases, email tracking, web tracking, all this kind of stuff. And we could build a system that pulls it all together. And that's where we founded Salesflare. We saw like CRMs are supposed to do this. They don't, because nobody wants to do that. And we can fix it. And that's the very spark for Salesflare.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think with a lot of the guests that we have on the Content Mix, a lot of them have similar story to you. They kind of have passion. So you kind of started off with the website design, which led you to one thing to the next, and kind of how you don't really expect to get to where you are. Like when you started, you weren't thinking, I'm going to do this. You knew you wanted to start a business, but you kind of combined all of your passions together to make Salesflare, which it seems like a very cool tool. I was looking at it before and it seems really, really exciting. But I guess my question now is, what's the big differentiating factor for Salesflare? Because there's a lot of CRMs out there in the market, and I want to learn a bit more about why Salesflare is unique.
Yeah, like I said, we basically fixed the main issue with CRMs, is that you don't use it because it's just too much work. Somehow people think it's normal to give you a system in which you have to do a ton of manual work before you even get a little bit back. And then many of these systems they're not easy to use, they're not fast, they're not integrated into your workflows. You have to do all this manual data input. And when all of this, you overcome all these obstacles, let's say, then it still doesn't really help you. And then if you work in a team environment, your sales manager is looking over your shoulder what you're doing and saying, don't do this, do that, So as a salesperson, you really hate it. Like this CRM thing, ugh. And we want to fix that because CRMs are supposed to actually help you sell, and then bring some of these other good things to the company as well, where the sales manager knows what's going on, where he can make forecasts, do some proper coaching. The marketing team knows what's going on. You can probably properly segment your leads or your customers, and gather insights from that, or target them with new stuff. And all of that only works if the very basics of it work, which is you keeping it up to date and using it as an actual sales tool.
Right. So it seems like the tool itself is providing people with autonomy, but also with transparency. So people kind of have, they can work on their own projects without having that sales manager, which we all fear, over our shoulders. But also the sales manager is going to be able, and the whole team is going to be informed about what's going on and the status of certain projects. So it really seems like a great tool, because a lot of CRMs don't do that. It kind of gives full transparency, and you don't have a lot of autonomy in the work that you're working on. So I am interested too, because I was looking at the content that you guys have on your website, and obviously this is the content mix, and this is our main topic of conversation is content marketing. But could you explain to us a bit more about your content strategy at Salesflare?
Our content strategy, basically we offer software, and that software helps you take better care of your customers, sell better, more organized, and all that. Now, our software is only so much. It's a system in which you organize stuff and automate things and control things and collaborate. But around that, there's a whole question of how do you work with it? How do you organize yourself more broadly within sales? And then maybe other stuff, even like things that don't have anything directly to do with Salesflare. You have all these questions like how do I run a business? Where can I get inspiration? All this kind of stuff. And our content strategy is first and foremost, and at least over the past 2 years now, we focus very much on things that are very complementary to Salesflare, in the sense that it's really content around it. Whereas in the past, I think the 1 or 2 years before that, we were like writing anything that was interesting to you because we just wanted to build up traffic. And then before that, our strategy was different again. We were like more focused on building up value and hype. So we've shifted a lot over time, but it makes that we have these very different sorts of types of content on our site. Some of it drives an enormous amount of traffic, but doesn't bring us a lot of leads. Some of it is really valuable to our customers and prospects and drives us many more leads. And others is just things that people look at and they share and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing type of content. So the shareable stuff. And this is stuff we also republish often. So you can see the different types of content coming back. We spend a lot of time not just on creating content, but on distributing and redistributing and optimizing, making it better, because there's so much value in what already exists versus new stuff we create.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe your target audience? Because from what I can tell, is you have some posts that really generate a lot of traffic to the website, which I'm assuming uses SEO and all of that. But also, you're trying to get leads at the same time. So, do you have to think about how one content might be better for traffic while the other one might be better for clients and potential leads? How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, our target audience, you'll see it also when you look at our content. There's like a few things that pull a lot of traffic are things like startup conferences and startup podcasts and things like that. We have a big investor list also. Or on the other hand, things like how to build a marketing agency, and things around this kind of things like tools for marketing agencies and stuff. And then we have a lot of content around sales. So our target audience, you already sort of guessed, is like startups. At least historically, we focused a lot on startups. More and more, it's more like tech companies than it is startups, because the type of companies on our software are also growing. But we have a lot of agencies mainly on the software. That means like marketing agencies, software development companies, consultancies. It's very popular with these people.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have another question surrounding this? Or?
Well, I was going to ask you more about like the content and how it resonates with your audience, but I was looking at the blog before and I saw like there was a post about, I think that you did how to manage a remote team. I don't know if I'm making that up, but it was really cool to see like you're providing also not just, content about what Salesflare does and how like it's going to be beneficial, but you're also giving content that's meaningful for people like in the agencies you mentioned and how to manage a team. So it seems like really like a great place to learn more about certain work that we can do in our day-to-day lives as well.
That's actually from some of the content which I didn't mention is like stuff we do and think like, okay, we can share this also with the world. Like how to manage a remote team is mostly around the learnings we had in the first months of the pandemic, how we adjusted ourselves and how that helped us. I did a presentation about that at a conference and we turned into a blog post as well, because then other people can use it too. But we're not necessarily entirely married to everything needs to be SEO and drive leads. Although that's where most of our efforts go nowadays, because we also need to get some business value from it. And of course, we still keep creating the same amount of business value for people reading it. But then it's more people reading it on a consistent basis with a link to Salesflare, let's say. So.
Right. And from previous, like we did some research for the interview and we realized that you don't rely on copywriters and you guys write it internally from what I can tell. So why don't you rely on copywriters and what do you do instead at Salesflare?
We don't do that because we want to actually offer value. What we see is that it's great to have copywriters write stuff as long as they know the topic. As soon as you pick a topic and you tell a copywriter, please write about sales or sales pipelines, for instance, and they have no idea what it's about, then what I saw in the past is I would have to spend way too much of my time creating an outline of what I thought was important in there. Then they would write something. The filling of the outline would be kind of fluffy. And then I would have to correct that. And the writing would be great, but the content wouldn't really be there, because what happens basically if you say like, please write something about sales pipeline, is as a copywriter, you don't really know, right? So what you do is you start Googling and you read other stuff. Now, the problem is that these things are also not written by experts. Most of these things are also written by copywriters, and it becomes this sort of giant, how can I say?
Yes, vicious cycle of...
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, which is almost downwards in the sense that it always gets more fluffy
right.
Because copywriters read what other copywriters wrote who
don't know what they're talking
read what
about.
other copywriters wrote, and then it just becomes more fluffy. So then in the end result is that you as a person, you want to learn something, go on the internet and you read a thing and you're like, okay, I just read something, but I have no idea, I didn't learn anything. And then you go to the next thing. We want to avoid that. And actually, the nice thing for us is then if in a sea of fluff, it's much easier to write something that stands out, because Google will also recognize it. If people end up on your article and don't go checking out others anymore and other things like that,
right?
Google knows, and you much more easily rank without needing like a ton of backlinks. It's just the engagement and just the fact that it seems that people found their answer.
Right.
Google will rank you way quicker.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. But it also, I really like how not only are you providing, accurate information to people about the sales pipeline and all the things that revolve around the product that you're selling, but at the same time, it's kind of like get to read an article by you. So it's like if we actually work with Salesflare, we're going to be working with you, and we actually have content that's true and accurate and kind of coming. It shows that also that you guys care, about the content you're producing. And I think with content marketing, that's one thing that's important. It's the value behind it. that you can get.
Definitely. And you asked like, how do we then, what do we then do if we don't use copywriters?
Right.
We write indeed part of our content in-house. Like if we feel that we know the topic, and finding someone and getting someone else to write it is going to take more time, then it just makes more sense that we just write it. But then for other things, like we've done a bunch of masterclasses, for instance, like a sales pipeline masterclass and a sales automation masterclass and a content marketing masterclass for those who are interested.
Definitely check it out.
And another one, a startup funding masterclass. And those, I come up with an outline which makes sense as a structure. It's like a series of blog posts, right? But all of the blog posts separately make sense and can also be a landing page for SEO, let's say. Now, when you do a content marketing masterclass, that was easy. I have a friend of mine. She's a content marketer. She writes really well. I mean, it sort of comes together in one package. So that was really, really easy to have someone that's really an expert write well and all that. I didn't have a lot of work with that. The startup funding masterclass, I was very happy to have another friend who knows all about startup funding, and he doesn't write too bad. I had to correct some stuff here and there, you know. The issue becomes if you want to find people who know a lot about sales and can also write, that's really, really difficult. So for some things, this is easy, and for some it's less easy. But then again, if you make a masterclass and you have it written by one expert, if you find that one expert, you're set.
Exactly. And where can people find the masterclasses? On your website?
It's on our blog. I think if you just type content marketing masterclass, you might find it, and otherwise you add Salesflare behind it, and you'll for sure find it. If you type content marketing masterclass, it's the 4th post in Google, for me at least. But if you add Salesflare, it'll be post number 1, obviously.
Everyone definitely check that out. It seems like I'm going to check it out after this. It seems very interesting. And also in another part of our preparation for the interview, we learned that Salesflare search traffic increased by 70% over a period of 3 weeks. So how did that happen? And what did you specifically do to get those results in such a short amount of time?
It's a very, very basic thing, but it only shows that some things that you might ignore for a long time are really important. What we did was we fixed some performance issues on our blog. That's literally it. To be precise, we replaced some bigger images with smaller ones, which made that pages loaded quicker. We lazy loaded some stuff. We had some JavaScripts moved from here to there, you know, all this kind of stuff to, if you do a Google Page Insights thing, check what's there, solve these things. And then additionally, we also had this issue between our hosting provider and Cloudflare, where basically the hosting provider was often blocking the calls from Cloudflare with their spam filter, because they often came from the same IP, which then would create all kinds of issues. Once we solved all these things, all of a sudden we were very surprised as well. Just our ranking started skyrocketing, and we were like, why didn't we do this earlier?
And were you able to maintain that growth after that?
Yeah. No, it's I think it went from, well, at least in Ahrefs, it went from like something like 12 or 13K organic traffic, what they count.
Right.
They have it's not super accurate, but and then it went to 17K. It fell a bit back, and now it's back to that level, I think, and it's even increasing. So maybe it will go higher than last time. We'll see.
That's great. So everyone, make sure you check your hosting, and I'll make sure everything is put into place to make sure your traffic grows in the right way.
Yeah, technical SEO and performance definitely pays off. The technical SEO we had done already, but the performance, we were sort of like, okay, well, it's difficult to fix this and that, and then you just, you don't do it.
And you have a lot of experience, as we learned at the beginning of the podcast, in different fields, marketing, engineering, web design, all these great things. But I want to ask you, in your opinion now in 2021, what are the most important skills for marketers nowadays to have to kind of navigate this crazy world that we're living
Um, I think sort of the necessary empathy, but it's probably more of where you apply your energy than just the fact whether you can empathize. It's more that you do an effort to do that.
Right.
You know, we live in a world where a lot of things happen at scale, especially in marketing. Marketing is basically sales at scale, you could say.
Right.
And it's very easy to forget who's on the other side. You know, people turn into numbers instead of actual people. And just thinking beyond that, thinking like, okay, we're now going to focus on one of the people that comes on our side. And I am that person. And I imagine like, what am I seeing here? What do I expect? What is the best possible experience? How can we make it even better? How will I feel respected? What will sort of wow me and all these kind of things.
Right.
Just going the extra mile there makes a big difference. And that's not just in marketing, it's even in sales nowadays. Like there's a lot of sales automation going on.
For sure.
And you know, you get spammed with all kinds of emails where
all the time.
You read them and you're like, how can anybody think that this is going to work on me? You know, you have that with almost every email and you're like, okay, that doesn't make sense. If that person would have actually applied some empathy, like on a person to person basis, like thought like, how would I approach a friend about this or something?
Right.
Then these kind of messages could be so much better. And it's in general in marketing an issue.
No, for sure. I think as technology improves and we're kind of moving into this world of instant gratification, we want things done quick and fast. It's easier to forget the human part of it. As you mentioned, I think it's so important that when you're producing content or you're in sales or in marketing, that on the other side of the receiving end of this information is a person. So it's really important to remember that, you know, if you receive that email, would you respond to it? Make sure you ask questions like that to really don't like. I think the most important thing is from what you said is that don't forget the human aspect of it. That's what makes
definitely
good. And as we come towards the end of our interview, we always kind of ask our guests about some recommendations that they can give to our listeners to improve their professional and personal lives. So I think nowadays we've heard a lot about habits, especially with lockdown and all these things. We need to have good habits, daily habits for success and to make sure we, stay sane. So for you, do you have any daily habits that you would recommend that you think make you more successful in your daily life?
I have a lot of daily habits, but maybe to pull it over, focus on a slightly different thing, because most people on the podcast will probably talk about some daily habits. We actually take this up on a company level as well, in the sense that what we saw is like, if we put goals, like we want X more traffic and we want so much more conversion and this kind of things, it's all cool, but it doesn't really motivate us over the year. And we tend to not reach the goals if we don't translate that into habits. So we basically, for our 2020 plan or 2021 plan, we set results, goals, and then we transform those into habits. And that's what we focus on during the year. And then the goals, we can measure them. It's cool.
Right.
And we see, we've been successful. But if you don't focus on these habits, it's never going to happen. So we set out things we do on a monthly basis. For instance, we create X features, onboarding improvements, growth improvements, SEO articles, visible outside our own audience. And we have all like measures for all these kind of things. We track whether we actually reach these habits, so that we on a consistent basis sort of have that input, and then the output follows, which is, first, we're much more likely to hit our goals. And secondly, it's also much easier to stay motivated because these goals are sort of the long run. We would like to get there kind of thing. While you do a thing, you see, you check it off, and boom,
Exactly.
That's much cooler.
I think with one of my book I read in the past year, which I loved, is called Atomic Habits, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. And it seems like that's what you're doing.
No, I read it also.
I think, yeah, it's great. If you haven't read it, read it. But basically it talks about how habits, we set these big goals and then we kind of lose motivation because it's overwhelming. And I think that's what you were doing within your company is you have these goals, but then you're breaking it down into smaller things that seem more tangible and that people actually can do. And then, so by breaking it down, people actually are going to reach their goals because it seems like more realistic. Because I think we get very overwhelmed. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves and we have like, okay, by the end of this quarter, or the end of this year, we need to have this, this, and this. And then we kind of spiral as humans. I think it's a natural reaction. So I think it's really cool that you're implementing.
Definitely, that's how it happens. And actually, we're taking sort of a next step now where one of my colleagues asked like, okay, I have these habits and stuff, but I would like to have them better defined, better tracked, and better because she saw that she's way more motivated if she sees like, okay, this is checked off, this is checked off. So we keep improving on that. So there's like you said a bit earlier, we have all this instant gratification. It's a sort of more instant gratification in that sense then, which is
exactly.
Nice.
And we get overwhelmed. And then if we don't get overwhelmed, then you're not going to make a good habit. And you have to kind of start small to go big. And I think that's also something we can find in general. Okay, if you want to start a business or you want to do this, okay, you have a goal, but you have to focus on the journey and how it's going to be in certain phases. It's not going to be all at once. And I think change takes time. So I think that's really, really cool that you.
That's really a big point as well. I used to be way more frustrated with like, okay, we didn't reach this huge goal yet. And then I would be like beating myself up like, oh my God, we didn't reach this yet. And then find another way instead of just consistently adding effort. Because that's in the end, realistically, what's going to get you there.
For sure. And do you have any professional role models that kind of act as a source of inspiration for you?
Not particularly. I read a lot of books, and recently it has been more of the opposite. Like I've read books with like the sort of stories that went wrong. Like I read the one about WeWork, and then I read an older book about long-term capital management. I don't know whether you know that one, but it's sort of like, I don't know whether you've ever seen the documentary about Enron. It's sort of the same thing, but then in a hedge fund. Like people that think they're really smart and they do stuff like this and that, and the culture turns like this, and then things first go really well and then they go terribly wrong.
Right.
And that's more of my source of inspiration right now. But if you want to have more of a positive story, I think the biography of Phil Knight, Nike, which is called Shoe Dog, is really amazing.
I definitely have to check it out. And also in preparation, you mentioned in a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And I was just curious, because I do think sleep's so important, but why is that a book that's important to you?
I think if I would ever write a book on how you not to fail as a startup company or mostly a startup company, because that's where it's really critical. I probably in the first chapter talk about the importance of sleep, the importance of eating well, exercising, staying balanced. These kind of things influence your productivity. It influences your mood, how stable you are, how well you can think, and it all starts from there. If you don't respect that and you go with the sort of hustle night and day kind of philosophy that is at least used to be very popular in startup world, then it's not going to be sustainable, and you might work really hard for a bit, but then everything comes crashing down.
Exactly. And I think as an American, that's something that's really ingrained in our culture, at least, is that you can't, like, you can have to work or you have to sleep. There's no balance. And I think we kind of, you're more productive when you're working all night long or into crazy hours. I think we're just like brainwashed in that way. So it's really refreshing to hear, it's something that I've incorporated in my own life, but to hear it from someone like you and from other guests that we've had, it's really important to have a balance in terms of it's not all about work. You need to take care of yourself too in order to be more productive, be more successful, for sure. And we're coming to the end of the interview. But before we say goodbye, I do want to ask if you have any final takeaways or parting advice that you'd like to give for our audience, or anything that you use in your work life, or something that you think would be really good for them to take from this interview.
Yeah, I think maybe wrapping up from some of the stuff I said, and it's going to sound cliche, but focus a bit more on quality than quantity, improving rather than running faster and doing more. That's really important when it comes to whatever, including content marketing. It's not necessary to churn out an enormous amount of articles. You can even cut back, remove the ones that are not great, update the ones you already have, re-promote them, see whether you can optimize the SEO titles so you get more traffic to them, whether you can optimize the beginning of them, optimize the CTAs, optimize the performance, all this kind of stuff. There's often way more value in taking a step back and improving stuff rather than just running forward and doing more, whatever.
Yeah, reflecting basically, and making sure every action has a reason behind it rather than
taking a moment to reflect. Yeah, we have ingrained a lot of that in our way of working. We have like bi-weekly team meetings in which we look at the good and the bad of the last 2 weeks, and the bad we fix and the good stuff we learn from. We have monthly one-on-ones. We have every 3 months we have a growth ideas meeting where we think about all kinds of stuff we can improve to make our growth better. And we have the support approach improvement stuff. And we have a lot of things like that where every time it's like, okay, we're doing stuff, but how can we do it in a better way?
Right.
Because there's much more to win there than in just doing lots of stuff.
For sure. And for our listeners who want to get in contact with you or kind of follow you on any social media platform or anything, where can we get in touch?
Yeah. If it's about the company, checking out Salesflare, salesflare.com, you can find out about Software Triad and stuff. And if you want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn is probably the best place. You can find me by my name. There's no other Jeroen Corthout. Send me a connection request, but don't forget the personal message. I get a ton of spam every day. And if you don't differentiate yourself with a personal message, then I will just assume it's spam. But if you do, then I will get in touch with you and we can have a chat.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jeroen, for taking the time to join us today. For perspectives on content marketing in Europe, make sure to tune into our podcast with content experts across Europe and check out our published episodes at veracontent.com/mix. See you next time. Thank you.